Welcome, my name is Dana Brown and I'm Xojo's Director of Marketing. In this tutorial, we're going to see how to list and use all of the available fonts under the iOS operating system in our project. With Xojo 2020, you can now create new instances for the font you want to use through the class fonts, providing for that the PostScript name of the font as the parameter for the constructor. You can find these kind of PostScript names for the iOS fonts on sub websites like iosfonts.com. Here we can see how for the Academy engraved font, its PostScript name is the one displayed just below it. This would be the same case if we wanted to use the American typewriter font in its bold style, condensed, etc. But this wouldn't be very useful if you want to offer to your iOS app user the option to select a given font in order to type or draw text in a canvas or any other supported UI control. In order to improve this, we created this example project that's in charge of listing all of the available fonts on iOS, and that will be able to display sample text in the selected font and with the selected font size. This is what we see in the example app running already in the iOS simulator. Here's a list displaying the PostScript name for all of the available fonts. And when the user selects one of them, our canvas-based control displays a sample text using that font. So it's very convenient in order to create new font instances because we already know the PostScript names of the fonts, even without the need to hard code them into the project. So how did we implement this? We start creating a new class. In our example project, it is named iOS System Fonts, where we use the singleton design pattern. We don't need to create multiple instances from the class in order to use it. Even in this case, we don't even need to create any instance at all. All we need to use are the available shared methods. The Font At menu, for example, will allow us to get the font available at the provided index, mimicking the behavior of the system.font_at, as it is also the case for the font count and with the fonts method to retrieve an array with all of the available fonts, or last font index to retrieve the last index value we can use. The code responsible to store all of the font names in the pfont string array is the one available in the class constructor. As you can see here, we use some declares in order to use some objects and methods available in the Foundation and UIKit frameworks from iOS. This means that we can get the extra functionality from our Xojo code. So in this section of declares, we assign some usual Objective-C selectors to the associated variables initCall, allocall, and ns class from string, all of them found in the iOS Foundation framework. These will allow us to create new objects. Next, we find two new declares. In this case, the ones related to the selectors or methods to retrieve all the font family names and the font names for a given font family name. In this case, font names for family names is the one that will give us the PostScript names for all of the iOS font. So a family name could be Apple, SD, Gothic, Neo, and below it are all the font names for that family. The next section of declares are the ones we need to use in order to create and work with arrays in Objective-C. So we can add them, the objects retrieved using the previous selectors, as we would do when adding objects to a Xojo array. So we have the selectors named count, object at index, and add objects from array. Once we have all the declares we need, and we've assigned them to the associated variables in Xojo, we're ready to start using them in our Xojo code. In this line, we are creating a new array object and assigning to it the font names array. Then we get the array returned by calling to the font names family method. And in the next line, we use the count method to get the number of objects stored in the family names array. I'm sure that this sounds familiar to you when using arrays in Xojo. Then the first for next block of code is the responsible one for retrieving all of the font family names and adding them to the font names array that we previously created. Then we retrieve the number of objects stored in that array and use a second for next loop in order to append the name of every font to our Xojo's property array. As you can see in the opening event of the default screen, we retrieve that array calling to our class fonts method, iterating next to that array to add every entry to the layout table. In fact, when the fonts method is called, you can see how it creates the instance of the class and returns the populated array with the font names. Because we already know the names of the fonts, we can implement the search changed event handler on the table so it can filter the displayed font names to those matching the type text in the search field. In addition, in the selection changed event handler for the table, it's now more easy to create a new name, passing along as the parameter for the font name the content of the selected row in the table, and also the size for the font typed by the user in the provided UI control. As you can see, thanks to the use of declares, we can add new native functionality to our iOS apps, in this case for accessing the fonts installed on the iOS devices. As usual, I hope you found this tutorial useful, and follow us on our social networks and keep updated on the Xojo blog. And if you want to get notified of new videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course visit us on the forum.